Good afternoon, friends. I'm Jennifer Copeland with the North Carolina Council of Churches. Happy Advent. First week of Advent is upon us, and we decided a few weeks ago when we saw the lay of the landscape that we would not wait passively during this Advent, but that we would be active in beginning to think coherently about our immigrant neighbors. And so to that end, we have invited Madison Burke from Church World Service to join us today and share with us some of the implications of House Bill 10, which she reminded me went into effect yesterday, so our timing is quite good. You may remember Church World Service or know Church World Service as the crop walk people. In Durham, we have the second largest crop walk in North Carolina, so we're very proud of our relationship with Church World Service and the work that they do through the crop walk. But in reality, they've been around since 1946, starting just after the end of the Second World War, when 17 denominations came together to help refugees from Europe and to help with all of the disaster that had been created by that war. And so it is a long and proud history that Church World Service has and that the North Carolina Council of Churches has as a relationship with them. Let me turn it over to Madison now, who will tell us a little bit more about Church World Service, but more importantly, a lot more about how we can be in solidarity with our immigrant neighbors. Thank you, Madison.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for being here. I think in this time, I'm reminded more than ever that this work can only be done in community. And so it's been very moving to me to see so many people express interest in the Solidarity Fund and supporting our immigrant neighbors, whether they be refugees, asylum seekers, undocumented folks, or folks with other status. And I do have some slides, so I'm going to share my slides. Let's see. Can you all see those?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then Jennifer, I think we have a few folks entering the room. If you can keep an eye on that. All right. Is that visible to everyone?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to be covering a lot in a pretty short amount of time. I also want to give the caveat that I am not an immigration attorney. I am not a border policy expert. I'm not a policy expert. I'm not a legal expert. But I am someone who is lucky enough to work pretty closely with some of our undocumented and immigrant neighbors. And I'm very excited to tell you a little bit more about the work that I do and how you can be of support. And so as Jennifer mentioned, Church World Service, just a little bit about Church World Service first, has been around since 1946, so coming up on 80 years. And we began responding to the wake of World War II, which up until now, at that point, that was the largest number of forcibly displaced people in all of human history until now. So we are seeing historic levels of forcibly displaced people around the world. Church World Service Durham has been around since 2009, so we are celebrating 15 years, hence my Zoom background. And our Greensboro office has also been around since 2009 and is celebrating 15 years as well. We have newer offices in Wilmington and Charlotte. Our Charlotte office is dedicated to working with unaccompanied children. And we have a new satellite office in Burlington, so we're very excited about that. And our offices offer a wide variety of services from traditional refugee case management services, reception and placement. So everything from setting up apartments, preparing people's homes before they arrive, to picking them up at the airport, kind of the first 90 days of getting kids enrolled in school, people sign up for benefits, assisting people in finding employment. There's quite a wide wealth of services we provide in the first 8-ish months of folks' arrival. We also have education, English classes, money class, job class, community engagement services. We have our immigration legal office. We have a licensed clinical social worker on staff to provide mental health services. So it is really remarkable to me, just the wide variety of services that we're able to provide. And The Solidarity Fund is one of those services. Just wanted to give a little bit of background on our undocumented neighbors in North Carolina. So this picture is from a rally in Charlotte back in 2017 in support of our undocumented neighbors. And the Migration Policy Institute estimates that there's around 300,000 undocumented immigrants living in North Carolina and around 20,000 just in Durham County. And these numbers are a little old, so not the most up to date, but about 3/4 are from Mexico and Central America. And I'm looking at my notes to make sure my numbers are correct if you see me looking off the screen. And North Carolina has become a more popular state for immigrants for a variety of reasons. We have a lower cost of living compared to places like New York or Chicago or Miami. We have major metropolitan centers. We have a robust highway system. We have a robust agricultural economy, and we have an established immigrant community. So many people come here because they have family members who've already been here for some time. Many come seeking economic opportunity, some fleeing gang violence or political instability, folks fleeing the effects of climate change, wanting better educational opportunities for their children, seeking medical care that they cannot obtain in their country of origin. And of course, everyone's case is different, but under our current immigration legal system, which is a system that is about as complicated as our tax code, as one immigration attorney told me, it is very difficult, costly, and time-consuming to adjust your status. Again, everyone's case is different, but a friend told me that his parents are undocumented. They've lived here in North Carolina for more than 20 years. He and his sister are both citizens, were both born here, and they talked to an immigration attorney who said that part of the process, which with no guarantee of success, would involve the parents having to go back to Mexico for 10 years. So these are very complicated processes. And just some more numbers. So North Carolina, and this is from UNC's group UndocuCarolina. So North Carolina is home to around 865,000 immigrants. Again, these numbers are a couple years old. About 35% of the immigrant population is undocumented. 7% of all North Carolinians are US citizen children of immigrants. And we have thousands of undocumented students attending our colleges, graduating from our high schools. And we also have thousands of DACA recipients living in North Carolina. And so I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about House Bill 10. And this picture is from my colleagues at El Pueblo, which is based in Raleigh and has been doing amazing organizing work, leadership development, and service to the Latinx and greater immigrant community for decades. And this picture really struck me because it shows community members, activists sitting in the higher level and making their voices heard at the vote in Raleigh. So House Bill 10, which is named the Require ICE Cooperation and Budget Adjustments, it's been in the works for a couple years. There's been variations, something that we've been following more closely for the past 2 years. And I'm reading some comments from my colleague in our advocacy department, as well as friends from Carolina Migrant Network, just to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row. It was reintroduced at the beginning of the legislative session in May. It passed both chambers of the state legislature and then was passed to Governor Cooper's desk, where he vetoed the bill. And then his veto was overrode in both the House and the Senate on November 20th, and the bill went into effect yesterday, December 1st. So a pretty quick process. And it's changed a little bit over time, but one of the parts that stayed consistent with the text is that it will force collaboration between federal immigration officials and local sheriff departments to hold and detain undocumented people arrested under their jurisdiction. And so previously it was kind of the discretion of sheriffs on whether or not they want, to what degree or how they wanted to collaborate with ICE, but this is something that would be going into effect statewide. So it will compel sheriff's officers to detain individuals who are charged but not convicted for any crime for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, if ICE makes a request. This could increase racial profiling, increase ICE detentions, thus increasing family separation, and discourage migrant communities from reaching out to law enforcement when they are in need of life-saving help in situations of imminent danger, greatly harming community safety, and would leave counties liable for potential civil rights violations. Many sheriffs or multiple sheriffs have consistently opposed this bill and emphasized that the bill would not make our community safer, but would actually do the opposite. And it's important to recognize that there are areas of the state where this actually won't change things a whole lot. And on a personal note, as I mentioned, or may have mentioned in the beginning, I worked in domestic violence court advocacy for a couple of years and served hundreds of immigrant survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, the vast majority of which were undocumented, and survivors frequently cited concerns around ICE or detention or deportation as a reason for not calling the police, not seeking a domestic violence protective order, or not really wanting to engage with the legal system at all. So I am deeply concerned for the survivors whose lives may be put at higher risk as a result of this legislation. It also added an amendment to the bill that would allocate $240 million to increase funding for opportunity scholarships in private schools. This is a voucher program that drives up private school budgets based on the number of applicants yearly, directing funding from public schools in North Carolina. And especially in the wake of Hurricane Helene, it is very discouraging to me to see funding diverted from other areas. So just making sure I've got all my points straight on House Bill 10. And again, this went into effect yesterday, so we are expecting to see results or potential outcomes in coming weeks, consequences rather. So what is the Solidarity Fund? It is a grassroots community fund to support our undocumented neighbors who are experiencing crisis. So community leaders came together back in late 2019, as there were a number of families who'd lived in the area for quite a while who were being affected by ICE detentions and deportations, and the community recognized just how few material resources there were available to assist families at this time. And so started the fund in late 2019, and then of course in 2020 with the COVID pandemic, undocumented families were disproportionately getting sick. They were disproportionately being laid off. They were not receiving stimulus checks, and they were not eligible for unemployment benefits. And so really an increase in support to the fund. The fund moved about $500,000 in direct assistance just in 2020. It started originally just in the Triangle, but now we have expanded to a regional model, which I will get to in a little bit. So why did we create this fund? So on the left, you can see folks who have resources available to folks who have status. And so, and of course, these vary a little bit depending on the particular status that folks have, whether they're refugees or citizens or TPS. But you can see that when crisis hits, folks with status can access things like unemployment benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, being able to take out credit lines or loans, programs like SNAP benefits or TANF, stimulus checks during the pandemic, Social Security or disability, Section 8 or other federal housing programs, whereas undocumented folks have to depend on personal savings, or maybe if a family member or friend is able to loan the money, local food pantries, community health centers, and other local projects. And so when we expanded to a regional model, we were lucky enough to be able to partner with a number of immigrant-led and focused grassroots organizations across the state. And so starting at the top, we are proud to partner with a Mexican, which is based in Greenville, the CULA, Centro Latinoamericano, in McDowell County, Carolina Migrant Network in Charlotte, El Pueblo in Raleigh, and then Siembra en Sí is based out of Greensboro, and CIMA, Compañeros Inmigrantes de las Montañas en Acción, is based in Asheville. And so basically creating this coalition of grassroots organizations, faith communities, individuals, other groups such as the NC Council for Churches, coming together to support undocumented households who are experiencing a financial crisis. And that can look like detention or deportation by ICE. It can look like someone who's about to be evicted. It can look like someone who's about to get their lights or water or heat turned off for non-payment. Someone who has experienced wage theft. I talked to a client whose former employer owes him $20,000, and there are not a lot of good avenues for him to pursue legal action. And so how it works is clients are referred. It's honestly a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of folks finding us on Google, but we also are referred clients by our partner organizations or hospitals or other nonprofits. The primary applicant has to be undocumented, which we define as not having a work permit. And so we can work with mixed status families or families where one or more people are undocumented and one or more people have status or citizenship. The application is very short. We ask for basic contact information, ask for a photo of their ID, which most of the time is a passport. We ask for the name and number of a personal reference, which could be a spouse or friend or coworker, any adult who can kind of speak to their financial emergency. We ask for a little bit of information on what's going on, what the emergency is, as well as, some sort of proof of emergency, so outstanding rent bill or, medical bill. We don't ask for a ton of information, and that's very intentional. I can do an application with a client in about 15-20 minutes. And so we are able to, when funding's available, we're able to provide up to $1,000 in a check that is written in the client's name. It's cut directly to the client, and so in cases of eviction, natural disaster, loss of utilities, death in the family, the emergencies that are not ICE related, and we're able to assist with up to $1,500 in ICE detention or deportation cases. And a question I commonly get is, well, what's $1,000 going to do? And I can only speak for myself. I've been privileged enough to never be at risk of eviction or losing water or heat or electricity, or my home being destroyed by a natural disaster. But a lot of families that I work with have minimal access to financial resources, might have $0. And so $1,000 in the light of that can do quite a lot. And so we have a wait list. As you can imagine, there's always more demand than funding available, but we process a wait list as funds come in. And then I send the application to my supervisor for review. And then when the application is approved, we're able to cut the check and get it to the client. So we try and, I like to say we treat people like adults, right? We don't ask for a ton of information, and we try and, keep the application process as dignified as possible. So this is just a map of the counties that we serve. So we do not serve all 100 counties in the state, although it would be wonderful to be able to someday. But we really focused on kind of the main metropolitan areas of the state and the surrounding counties. And how it works is we wanted to help people keep money local, and 100% of all gifts go directly to families. My salary, all the administrative and operational costs, is covered by a different funding source. So if someone were to give $5, for example, to the Triangle Solidarity Fund, it would go directly to a family that lives in Orange, Durham, or Wake counties, all of those $5. And I myself give monthly to all 5 of the regions. In terms of data, so back in the 2023 calendar year, I need to update this as we're very quickly wrapping up 2024, we were able to serve 77 households, majority of those being in the Triangle and Triad regions, and we served 250 individuals, including children. And we were able to distribute over $30,000 in the Triangle, over almost $29,000 in the Triad, and we have distributed over 1.1 million across the state since the program's inception in 2019. We're celebrating 5 years this year. And that's all from the community. We don't get state or federal funding. We don't get big grant awards for this project. So those are all people like yourselves coming together and saying, we want to help stand in this resource gap and show our undocumented neighbors, even folks that we'll probably never meet, that we care about them and want to support them in time of need. And of course, it takes a village, right? This work has to be done in community. And so I'm very grateful to other partners that I'm able to refer folks to. So this is just a snapshot of a couple resources that I've referred folks to, particularly in the Triangle area, a number of churches and food banks and other programs that have, a lot of deep trust with the community, and, are able to provide other forms of support. And so these are just a couple stories. I've changed the names. Of course, I also, have removed any identifying information, but just to kind of give you a sense of what our microgrants are able to do. So one, I'll call him recently arrived asylum seeker from South America. And this is a story I unfortunately hear all the time. He came to North Carolina with his children, planning to stay with a friend of a friend. He was having trouble finding stable or consistent work. His host, after a couple of weeks, said he needs to leave because he couldn't contribute to the rent payment. And a lot of folks say, my landlord doesn't, you can't stay here permanently because you're not on the lease, and we can't all get evicted. So he reached out to us for assistance, and we were able to provide an $800 microgrant, which he was able to put down on a deposit for a room to rent. Another one is Paula, has been in the area for many years and has a young child. Her child has extensive medical issues that require full-time care. Her ex-partner left, leaving her responsible for all the bills. It's very hard for her to work a job due to the care needs of her child, and losing her ex-partner's income was a big blow to the family budget. She was gone behind on rent and was very close to facing an eviction. And with the microgrant, she was able to make quite a dent in her owed rent and help avoid eviction. And then Maria arrived 2 years ago. She wanted to apply for a work permit through the asylum process, but she had trouble getting the money together. She has health complications requiring hospitalization, which impeded her ability to work. She's now has massive medical bills and has now gotten behind on rent, as she needed to prioritize buying her medication. With the ISF, she was able to pay most of her owed rent and avoid eviction. And so a common question I get is how people can help. And I think there's a ton of ways to get involved. I am the first to say that there are many, many people much smarter than me, with more expertise than me, who've been doing this work much longer than me. So I really encourage folks to connect with the organizations in your community that have been doing this work for years, that have been working with the immigrant and undocumented communities, and ask them what they need, how you can be of most support, and plug into work that's already being done. I think especially with the undocumented community, it's important to build trust, as with anyone, to build relationships, and to, don't be afraid to go slow, and again, lean into the expertise and guidance and wisdom of people and activists who've been doing this work for a long time. And so some ideas just to think about: offering financial support to these organizations. A lot of these groups are grassroots. They're very small, they have very tiny budgets, and so wanting to support them in their work. If you or someone is an immigration legal, has immigration law experience, or is an attorney or paralegal, now is a great time to get involved. I know there is some movement on trying to organize power of attorney clinics across the state to help families safety plan and think about care for their children in the case of a detention or deportation. So if you have immigration law experience or know someone who does, now is a great time to get connected. Same with if you are bilingual, interpretation services are always welcome. Even providing folks with rides. Driving without a license is a risk for undocumented folks. I've heard of groups kind of create, who are in relationship with an undocumented family, creating kind of like a phone tree group. So, that 6 or 7 people's phone will ring if someone gets, detained, and they get that one phone call. So that someone is going to answer, and a group kind of having a plan for, immigration attorneys to contact or how to support the family. Again, if you're, assisting families in making a safety plan, thinking about contingency plans for care of children, connecting folks to know your rights presentations. There's a lot of movements going on to get people access to information, access to knowledge, and even just sharing those on your church's website or Facebook can be hugely helpful. In the past, there have been ICE rapid response kind of mutual aid groups where there's like WhatsApp neighborhood group messages, and people, say it's both training the community on how to recognize when ICE may be present, and also training folks who have status on how to respond. So someone can send a message in the group and say, hey, like there's this car that's been, tinted windows kind of hanging out here for a couple hours. I'm concerned. And so they can, send a message, and folks with status can, head over and kind of see, is it ICE? Is it police officer? Is it someone else? And just kind of provide that level of support. And I, just encouraging folks to, commit to the long haul. I was in a presentation about Hurricane Helene several weeks ago, and the presenter said, the best thing you can do right now is give money. And the second best thing you can do is set reminders on your phone for 3, 6, 9, and 12 months from now. So I think, this work is going to require, commitment for the next couple of months, next couple of years, and beyond. We know that this has been a concern and issue for quite some time. And hearing from my colleagues in our advocacy team, advocacy at the local and state level made a difference and continues to make a difference. This is a great time to be building relationships with your local representatives. And, it's such an honor for me to work with our undocumented neighbors who are, so brave, so brilliant, so smart. And so I, really encouraging folks this is not a victim narrative, right? Like, these are folks who, many of whom have been in our community, contribute greatly to our community for so long and in so many different ways. Another way to get involved is, sharing about the Solidarity Fund to your organizations, to your faith communities, to your neighborhood networks, having conversations with folks. I believe that conversations, relationship building, and stories really do help make change and change hearts and mind. Of course, we welcome financial gifts. Monthly gifts help stabilize the fund and allow us to project more quickly how we're able to move folks off the wait list. There's a number of ways to give. And continuing to advocate against anti-immigrant policies. I'll drop these in the chat. I'll also send Jennifer a follow-up email with information to share out to the group. CWS has action alerts via email or text that are ways to, reach out to your representative or advocate for pro-immigrant policies. And we actually do have a document. It's the top 5 ways to take action in support of refugees and newcomers from now until January 20th. And I encourage you to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, we're on Facebook. I believe our Burlington office does not have Instagram yet, but these are our handles, pretty much CWS insert office city. And it's a fun social media presence too. We try and make it fun. And then this is my contact information. I do a lot of presentations. I'm always happy to present or have coffee or grab lunch or, kind of help you connect with agencies that are doing great work or be a thought partner. And then this is a QR code that takes you to the website for the Solidarity Fund. And I'll share these slides with Jennifer as well. So that is the end of my presentation. And I think we're right at 12:30, miraculously.
Thank you, Madison. This was great. If folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll pitch them to Madison for you. But I have a question, and you've just put the link up there about the 5 ways to be supported, but maybe you could give us a couple of examples of those 5 ways to take action as a local advocate, other than giving money. We got that one, and we will.
Yeah. So I'm going to drop, that is the wrong link. Let's see. I'm going to drop the action to where so step 1 would be signing up for the action alerts,
Okay.
because those are going to help, especially with national level initiatives. Let's see. Look, link. So kind of the biggest takeaways, especially kind of in this lame duck period before January 20th, is doing a lot of contacting your members of Congress and the Biden administration and urging them to take kind of critical steps, especially around like setting budgets for certain things. There's a lot of organizing now about like groups coming together to, whether it's through the ICE rapid response mutual aid groups or, other very localized community groups to prepare for any potential specific attacks on refugee resettlement and humanitarian protection. There's a program called private sponsorship groups, which is where a small group of people comes together to welcome a refugee, and they do a lot of fundraising to support the cost of resettlement and then providing really intensive support to that family. So that program is called the Welcome Corps program, and that began just in early 2023. And so that's a way, if a faith community or another group of folks wants to come together. Of course, that is, it's a process. It involves background checks and chaining, and so it involves quite a bit. But that's something to work into or to look into. And this is the time, to organize fundraisers, to organize educational events, to bring presentations to your neighborhood group, to your church, to your faith community, to your place of work, just to continue to provide more information. And, there is a lot that we don't know, and we are going to kind of in slightly a wait and see period. So just trying to prepare as best as we can and respond as quickly as possible to the changes that may be coming down the pipeline. And then continuing to amplify on social media, on your personal platforms. There's always volunteer opportunities at local refugee resettlement offices, as well as other immigrant serving organizations. So also if you have the time and capacity, that's a great way to support as well.
So maybe a little follow-up question on the heels of what you just offered. Our experience the last time this administration was running the country was that refugee resettlement almost shut down completely because people were simply not being allowed into the country. So I can't imagine that it would be any different this time, but perhaps it will be.
Yeah, we of course don't have a crystal ball as no one does, but we are expecting there to be cuts to the number of refugees.
And someone asked this question earlier. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to pitch it to you. Does the Immigration Solidarity Fund serve all immigrants or only the Latino community?
So we serve all undocumented immigrants. The majority of clients I work with or have worked with to this point have been Latinx from Latin America, but we have also served folks from South Africa, from Turkey. We do know that in recent years, there has been an increase in folks, coming from the US-Mexican border from parts of the world that were previously unseen before. So it is for undocumented folks, but we recognize that is a very diverse community of people.
And then just to clarify for some of us on the call, the Immigrant Solidarity Fund is a part of Church World Service.
Yeah, it is a program of Church World Service, but it is unique to North Carolina.
Oh, good. Well, good for North Carolina. So another question that I had, I have a lot of questions while you were talking, trying to monitor questions from others as well. Can you give us a little more advice on how to become a rapid response volunteer, or do we just log onto your website and sign up?
So,
and what will be involved also in that?
So I'm going to have to follow up and with the information on how to get connected to those groups. I was trained as a rapid response volunteer like 4 years ago at this point, 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm not even sure because a lot of those efforts are very grassroots and mutual aid driven. So I'm not even sure if that group is still functioning. So I'm going to have to follow up with specifics on how to get connected and how to sign up. But basically, when I did it, it was about an hour, and the facilitators kind of explained, looking at what an ICE detainer actually looks like, what a signed one looks like, kind of reviewing basic know your rights information. And I actually just ordered, I'll share this as well. There are red cards that folks can order. I forget the name of it's like the National Immigration Legal Resource Center. Don't quote me on that, but it's red cards. They're English on one side, Spanish or whatever other language you want on the other side. And it basically kind of gives people language in terms of engaging with an officer, talking about like, these are my rights. I'm, choosing not to speak. And it's something that people can literally slide under the door. So something that folks can have in their wallet, in their back pocket. But in terms of getting trained as an ICE responder, rapid responder, they kind of reviewed a bit of that information and then talked about how, if you ask a police officer for their badge number, they're legally required to provide it to you. So if someone's not doing that, that could be a sign, kind of talking about how, and I'm generalizing here, and this is something I was told 3 or 4 years ago, but how ICE doesn't like a lot of attention. And so if a bunch of people start showing up, there is a chance that they may drive away. And of course, it's not a structural solution, right? It's not a long-term solution, but it is, folks in the community who have status and have that privilege coming to support their undocumented neighbors. And I've heard, I don't know what's going on in Charlotte, which is where the immigration court is, but I've heard in other parts of the country of different groups who, will go to immigration court and provide, a pastoral presence or just a presence of folks, who care about what's going on. So I will follow up with more information on specific ways to get connected.
And we have a question, where can we get those red cards?
I will follow up with that as well.
Oh, okay. We don't get them from you?
People have to order them through the website, but they're free.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's likely, Madison, you don't know the answer to this question, and I certainly don't, but do you get a hint from the new North Carolina executive branch that there will be some help from them insofar as our governor has any power left from the General Assembly?
I cannot answer that question as above my pay grade.
Maybe we can check on that, friends, and
yeah,
and get back to you on that. We can get Jeff Jackson on here in a week or two.
Yeah,
see what he has to say about those things.
There is a group, it's not local, but it's a group called El Refugio, the Refuge in Georgia. And I've heard of groups from North Carolina, like driving down, it's a long drive, especially depending on where you're coming from, but they act as a hospitality house for folks who are coming to visit folks who are detained. They also assist people who have just been released from the detention center. So again, long drive, not local, but that's a group on a personal note, I give to them as well because they're just doing some really remarkable work.
This is Ginny in North Carolina in Greensboro, and I have been down there several times, plan to go back there the end of January, and it is an amazing group to work with, and it's an amazing privilege to host people for that weekend. And we also help out when we can. We go in and sit with, for me, not a Spanish speaker, sit with somebody to hear a story, so people have the chance to have a voice. So it's El Refugio, and highly recommend. If you need more information, get in touch with me.
Thank you for that.
And I think this is also a good time to have conversations with schools, talking about like what are their policies, what are plans in place, what happens if, mom or dad doesn't come to pick up their kid because they got detained, or what happens, just for better or for worse, we have some experience, right? We've been through first administration. And so just, rekindling those conversations on, how can institutions as well as families safety plan. And I'll send those, it's the same organization that distributes the red cards, but I'll follow up and I'll send it's in English and in Spanish, the family safety planning document.
Thank you. Yes, I have heard of groups that families who always have a safety plan in case the kids get home from school and their parents aren't there to meet them, what to do, who to call. And
Yeah, and it's, it's a document that's definitely geared towards undocumented families, but I think has valuable advice for any family. I'm a big proponent of everyone's safety planning for their, whether it's for hurricane or a tornado or unexpected emergencies.
you need to meet my daughter. She's all about the safety plan.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here's another question for you, Madison, and it may be outside your bandwidth also, but I have heard that if someone is detained by law enforcement and they are reported to ICE, if that person is bailed out before ICE shows up, then ICE may not necessarily be able to take them into custody and deport them. Do you have any idea if there's any truth to that? Because we could start a cash bail fund.
That's a great question. And one of the things that like the ICE micro grants through the ISF can do is for that reason. To be entirely frank, I don't know what the landscape is going to look like now with House Bill 10.
Thanks.
Yeah, but the $1,500 is designed. One of the ways it can work is going towards that. I see any question from Kimberly, any advice for churches who want to know how to respond if ICE/police come onto their property to interrogate or arrest immigrants or refugees? Again, I'm going to defer to the folks, like the information I'm going to share afterwards, to the folks who have deeper expertise in that. I am not equipped at this moment to like give a 5-minute know your rights training, but one of the things they do talk about is, and there are examples of this you can find online, is looking up like what a signed detainer looks like, ones that's signed by a judge versus a not signed one. Because I think often, or sometimes ICE will just like start shoving papers in people's faces, and obviously that's stressful for anybody, much less if you're undocumented and may not speak English. But that is something that institutions can train themselves on, like recognizing, okay, what does a signed one look like? What actually gives them right to entry versus not? And doing, practice runs with staff. I think those are very stressful situations. And so, drilling it can be helpful.
Let me also add to that question. I think the question probably comes out of the remembering that we had a sanctuary network across North Carolina during the last administration that was heavily into deportations. And the reason we were able to set up this sanctuary network with a handful of churches across North Carolina is that ICE has kind of an unwritten policy that they won't come into churches, schools, and hospitals. But I don't think there's anything official about that. I think that has just kind of been a safe space for folks. But we have no reason to think, and I have talked to all of our previous sanctuary partners a couple of weeks ago. We have no reason to think that ICE will honor that this time around. If you remember in 2017, 2018, when we were going full gang on this, we would call a press conference every time somebody came into a sanctuary setting to be sure that everybody knew we're not harboring a criminal, I'll put that in quotes, but this person is here, we are protecting them, this is a sanctuary site. And now I don't think I would call a press conference. If somebody wanted to move into my church, I think I would just set them up downstairs in a comfortable place and make sure they could take a shower and have a way to prepare food, and then hope that nobody came. That's not legal advice either. That's just where I think we are, sadly, in this country. We have talked to some folks about sanctuary, and nobody seems to think that it's a good idea at this point.
I think, again, I cannot give legal advice. I'm not a legal attorney or expert, but one piece of advice and something that's included in the safety planning is especially for, immigrants who have status, like making sure you that always have a copy of documents on them at all times.
Thank you, Rachel, for finding that. 2011, that was a long time ago.
Mhm. Yes, and I'll add too with that. The biggest thing if ICE does go into churches or those safe spaces that they've have in this memo that they say they won't go to, the best thing to do is start recording, getting a large crowd there. Like Madison mentioned, they do not like the attention. And
No.
also it looks really, really bad to go into a church and start asking questions and detaining immigrants. So video cameras, people, having everyone there to witness it.
Thanks, Rachel. Rachel coordinated that sanctuary network for us. How many years ago was that now? 6, 7. Are there other questions? A list of do's and don'ts.
So that's kind of the function of the red cards, right? It reminds people and, short bullet points that can be, absorbed during a very stressful moment, what their rights are, recommendations. And so also encouraging families, to, memorize like contact numbers, all these things that are listed in the safety plan that I'm going to share. But yeah, just, preparing in advance and remembering that, they do have rights, that they can, use their voice and demand the things that they are legally entitled to and deserve.
Marty asked a question about sanctuary, so I'm going to circle back around to that. And I think, and the people we've talked to believe that in order for sanctuary to be successful, it needs to have hundreds of congregations involved. So it needs to have a statement across North Carolina, a big and bold statement. And it might be difficult to line up hundreds of congregations to engage in this kind of work. Just the infrastructure alone sometimes is difficult for a congregation. And then the 24/7 presence is hard to generate. Not that we should not do something because it's hard, but also the sentiment is that probably ICE is not going to respect these sensitive sites, as they called it in the memo that Rachel shared with us. Doesn't mean that that it wouldn't happen or couldn't happen as we move through this and see what develops. It's not off the table, but right now it doesn't seem to be the first and best option for what we think we might be facing. To answer Annette's question, my understanding of House Bill 10 is that if an undocumented person is arrested for any reason, traffic violation or jaywalking or whatever, then that person has to be reported to ICE. That is the law of North Carolina with House Bill 10.
And the question from Amparo is, I think just as folks may carry a driver's license or a state ID, it never hurts to carry a copy of, important documents. And from Desiree, one things that I saw listed on the safety plan, and of course, immigration attorneys are incredibly expensive or can be. That is not something that everyone is able to access easily, but it talked about if someone's a green card holder, it might be eligible to apply for citizenship, look into that. Just kind of if you have the option to adjust status or an opportunity to explore those options, again, recognizing that cost prohibitive, time consuming, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I think, Desiree, one of my go-to refrains is encouraging folks to consult with an immigration law professional, whether that be through a nonprofit agency or, otherwise, or there are folks who are offering low bono or just, kind of free consultations or different things to help people get started. And for example, and there's an attorney out of Wilmington who recently did a kind of in Spanish, a Facebook Live Q&A session. And so I was able to share that with my clients. And I think there are a lot of people trying to get information out there.
Someone asked earlier in the chat if we would share the list of participants from this webinar so that you all might network together if you find yourselves in the same location. We typically don't share names and contact information out of our database just to protect your privacy. But if you want us to do that, I think we would need to get approval from everybody on the screen. We can look into it. Maybe if you don't want us to do that, let me know. You might ask that question in reverse. I do think it's important for folks to network in their local communities.
And again, I would just encourage folks, connect with immigrant leaders in the community, connect with folks who've been doing the work for a long time and ask them, what do you need? How can we support your work or your organization's work or your mutual aid group's work?
Well, there you go. Rachel's already got an answer to that question. So if you want your contact information shared, we can do it this way. Okay, does anybody have any other questions for Madison? We'll let her go get back to her very important job. All right, Steve and others who have talked about sharing information, Rachel's going to send a Google document to everybody who registered, and you'll be able to opt in that way. So if you don't opt in, then your information won't get shared. And we'll get the recording out at least in the next 24 hours. All right, thank you, Madison. I know.
Yeah, thank you all
so much. And thanks to all of you who have joined us today. Get connected locally. If you have a hard time getting connected locally, reach out to us at the council, and we'll try to find out what's going on in your neck of the woods and hook you up with those folks.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your time and your care and concern. Groups like these give me a lot of hope. And on behalf of the clients I have the pleasure of working with, thank you. I have a lot of clients say, pass along my thanks. I know we're never going to meet most likely the people who support the fund or are supporting us in this time. So thank you all so much for your care and concern, and keep it going. It's not just about now. It's not just about January. It's the next months and years. It's a long game.
And let me put in a plug for the rest of the month. We are going to have different people who have knowledge about different aspects of the immigration situation. So we will be back here at noon next week, the third week and the fourth week of Advent, to continue to share information with everyone about how you can get involved and how you can be in solidarity. So feel free to share that with your friends, and join us again next Monday. Have a great week.
Thank you.